afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Witches of the Moon. I am your Friday hostess, Natalie. This week, in week 5, we are discussing the elementals. Once again, we are going back to basics and doing the elemental of fire this week. Now, fire is obviously one of the more powerful elementals, in my opinion. Fire is something that we use in the craft quite extensively in a variety of different ways. Fire traditionally is associated with the south, and many people, I think, associate that or see that connection because typically we think of the southern hemisphere as being very hot. I know here in the United States, the south, it tends to be a much hotter climate than if you were to go to the north, where it's much cooler. I want to let you know that I have made some notes for myself, so you may see me kind of glancing down periodically because I want to make sure that I cover all the points that I made for myself for this video. So again, traditionally associated with the south. I do not know the traditional Wiccan color for the element of fire. I know in my practice the fire color is actually white. My elemental candle is white, but it is oriented to the south, and so whenever I do a grand ritual, celebration of a Sabbath or something like that, where I have my full candle, elemental candles out with my altar table, I will make certain that that candle is placed in the south, and it is, you know, what I associate with fire. Fire is used as a boosting agent often in our craft. In other words, fire can add a lot of oomph to your spell. So sometimes we will burn things in our cauldron, which actually the cauldron is something that is typically associated with the element of water, and I'll get into that when we talk about the element of water, which is in 2 weeks. So fire is used, again, we do use the cauldron. We burn our burners, charcoal tablets, sorry. I have used them in my cauldron before because the cauldron is a good vessel to produce heat. It contains heat well. You do have to be careful when you're working with the element of fire in your practice, but when we're talking about fire as an elemental, as something that is representative of one of the universal powers of nature, then it can really bring a lot of oomph to your craft. When we want to provide an extra boost to our craft, we'll do things that burn well, like add sulfur powder. Sulfur powder or saltpeter is something that burns very easily. Sulfur and saltpeter are not the same thing, by the way, but they are things that are used in gunpowder. There are 2 of the elements used in gunpowder. So charcoal we tend to use, that's something that we burn, so it brings in that element of fire. We often burn candles on our altar, which it brings in the element of fire into our ritual or into our craft. If you are fond of doing candle magic, then you may associate yourself very easily with the element of fire. I do a lot of candle scrying because I feel very drawn. It's odd because I'm not one of these people that I feel drawn to a particular elemental. I like a lot of different elementals, and I incorporate those things into my craft kind of together. I kind of almost feel like you can't really separate one from the other in terms of they're all powerful. They all have a specific purpose. They all help us in different ways, but being that I was born on the cusp, I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I was born on the cusp between a water sign and a fire sign. Go figure. Makes for an interesting kind of individual. But I do use candles for scrying, and I do like fire. I've always been very drawn to fire. I like fireworks. Fireworks may be a way that you can incorporate one aspect of fire into your household. If you like to do celebrations with fireworks, that may be one way to do it. I would caution you, however, anytime you're working with the element of fire, obviously, it is extremely powerful, unpredictable, and dangerous. Remember that in order to have the element of fire, you need 3 things. You need fuel, oxygen, and heat. So anytime you're dealing with those things, you need to be very careful and make sure that these kinds of things that will bring about the element of fire are used with extreme caution and care. Never leave anything burning unattended, obviously, and don't use them around children or people who are prone to accidents, because things will happen. So that being said, there's my precautionary statement. Now, on your altar representation, sources of fire would be, again, if you burn candles, if you burn charcoals and use a loose incense, if you burn incense, Then again, as I mentioned in the video regarding the elemental of air, you have that aspect of combined aspect of fire and air. As the incense burns, it is using the element of fire and it represents the element of fire, but as the smoke rises, that represents the element of air. But it's one good way in which you can combine those two elements in your altar or in your home space if you're looking to bring the element of fire into your home. And we'll talk about that. Some other traditional associations with fire are in the tarot, the suit of wands or rods is often associated with the fire signs, which include Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. So in terms of doing a tarot reading, you may see someone who falls under one of those signs coming up, like in the King of Rods or the Queen of Rods, the Page of Wands, the Knight of Wands, whatever. Something like that. It may represent someone who is a fire sign, such as an Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius. When I am doing spell work and I want to incorporate the element of fire, I may use a tarot card from the deck of, from the deck of whatever deck I feel like using. I may use a tarot card from the suit of wands in order to incorporate the element. I may place several out to help me focus and bring that element of fire into my spell work. Some herbal associations that go along with the element of fire are just simple things that you would think, oh yeah, chili peppers, anything that produces any kind of heat, anything with casein may be something that is associated with the element of fire, or is something that is associated with the element of fire. So anything with any kind of a punch or a pow. Chili powders, chili peppers, turmeric, ginger, things that have a strong spice or a bit of heat to them are things that we can associate with the element of fire, and are another way that we can bring the element of fire into our actual physical craft. Household methods of incorporation. Some ways that you can incorporate the element of fire into your household might include things like if you have a fireplace. We have a fireplace. I know some places either don't allow them anymore or don't have them, but if you have something like that, sometimes, and this sounds kind of silly, but I do this when I want to bring an element of warmth and welcome the element of fire into my home, especially like during the winter months. A lot of times during the Christmas season, there's a channel on the cable network that will show a Yule log after a certain hour of the night, like 9 o'clock, from 9 o'clock until 7 o'clock the next morning. It'll just be a burning Yule log, and I'll just put that on and leave it on the television and let it, my focus go to that and kind of give homage to the element of fire. Other ways in which you can incorporate the element of fire into your household in an honoring method would be to use decorations that represent fire, candles, the sun, things such as that. Anything that puts out any kind of light might be a good way, even a flashlight if need be. I have some little battery operated flickering candles that I will sometimes use when I want to represent fire, but I'm not in a position to use it. I don't personally like doing that, and I don't find that it's as strong as an actual candle, but my husband's undergraduate degree is emergency management, and he had to take a fire science class, several of them, and he hates candles. He hates incense, he hates anything like that that incorporates fire, so I have to be very careful and kind of use those things when he's not around. But if you have an outdoor area and you're wanting to set up an elemental altar for the 4 areas, you can also set up like a fire pit. If you have a fire pit out of doors, maybe just a grill, like a small Weber grill, you could use that as a representation of fire, and you don't even necessarily have to burn anything in it, because it automatically brings to mind the element of fire, which calls that elemental to you. I was trying to think of, gods and goddesses associated with fire. To be honest with you, I'm not as up on that as I should be, probably. All of my books are currently at my office space, and so I've not got my book of correspondences with me. So in terms of deities that are associated with fire, in my personal mind, certain deities I do associate with fire would be Hades, would be, I even at times incorporate or associate the goddess Morrigan with fire, because fire is an element that's often used in battle, especially back in the ancient times. They would use catapults with, you know, tar or something that they could easily set on fire and launch it, because fire destroys. Fire is a purifier. So fire is your ultimate destroyer and renewer. And what I mean by that is, think about how a forest fire works and how pine cones work. Pine trees cannot reproduce without some element of heat and fire. Fire is typically what is required to open the pine cone and release the seeds. So when you think about how much undergrowth grows up on a fire, and you think about a big forest fire like lightning, pictures of lightning, that may be another good way to incorporate the element of fire into your practice, to have some representation of lightning, to wear lightning bolt earrings or lightning bolt, something like that. So Thor may be a good god to associate with fire, simply because he's associated with thunder, although I would consider that more air myself. Anyhow, some other ways, where was I going with that last thing? I wasn't finished with what I was going to say. I apologize, I went off on a tangent. But I was stating that I associate the Morrigan also with fire, simply because that's something that was used in battle. Oh yes, I was talking about fire as a purifier. Okay, sorry, back on track. Forest fires. When you get so much undergrowth that builds up, and then you get lightning that comes and it strikes the ground and it sets a forest fire, or somebody throws out a forest fire, you go back to that same spot maybe 5 to 10 years later, and there will be all kinds of new growth. Even within a year, there's all kinds of new growth where there was once total destruction. And that new growth could not occur if it was not for the fact that the heat from that fire then allowed some of that underbrush to go away, which allowed for new growth. So in that way, fire is very much a purifier. We talk about things like trial by fire. You know, we say that, you know, we walked through fire, or we walked across coals, or we went through a trial by fire, meaning that we've survived some sort of heat and pressure that makes it very difficult for us to operate. When you talk about the effects of the element of fire on the lungs, it will collapse your lungs. If you go into a backdraft comes, the way it kills you, it's almost instantaneous, because instantly your automatic reaction is to intake. With the minute you intake, that air goes in, singes the lungs, collapses your alveolars, and there you go, you're done. So it's a very powerful force that purifies and cleanses, but at the same time it allows for renewal and rebirth. So I think that it goes very well with in combination with other elements that could also represent other things. Again, the cauldron. I see the cauldron at once as an element of water and fire. I don't think you can separate it from either one of those things. I know traditionally people associate it with water because they say the Awen, or the waters of rebirth that come from the cauldron, and so on and so forth, especially those who follow the goddess Caradwyn. However, I also see it as an element of fire, because there was a fire under the Awen. You needed the heat in order to mix things. When you are wanting a chemical reaction to occur, you often need heat, you often need fire, the element of fire. So it's extremely strong and extremely powerful, and causes many different reactions. So it is something that we should definitely be willing to learn more about and work with, but always taking caution, of course. That is all I had to say on that element today. I hope that I gave you guys some food for thought, because my goal with these videos isn't so much to, well, it's to educate and to inform and maybe give you new information, but also to spark your thinking in new ways. I would love to get some dialogue and feedback going on how you all use the elements in your practice, particularly this week, the element of fire. So your comments on how you incorporate the element of fire into your practice, into your home, and into your daily life would be very much appreciated. I hope you all had a good week. I hope that you've learned a lot from us this week, and that we're helping to bring you back to those basics. Many blessings, and we'll see you next week.